The night I drove my wife's younger sister home. I thought the worst thing waiting for me was a quiet ride and an awkward goodbye. I was wrong. Quiet would have been a mercy. My name is Wesley Hale. I was 41 years old, married 11 years, and still stubborn enough to believe that a slow drive down a wet country road, taken after a backyard cookout, could not tear the whole shape of a man's life in half. My wife Diane liked hosting, not because she loved people, because she loved running the room. Our backyard always looked staged when folks came over. String lights hung in neat rows across the fence. The good cooler packed and set exactly where she wanted it. Country music turned down just low enough to seem like nobody had thought about it. A folding table of food she had bought and plated, though she would tell me later I had grilled the corn wrong, because the char made the platter look, in her words, like roadkill. That was Diane. Sharp, put together, easy in a crowd, and somehow in private always a little disappointed in me. That Saturday evening, she had two couples over and her younger sister, Simone. Simone was the only person in Diane's orbit I actually liked. Not because she worked at being likable, because she didn't. She was kind without making a show of it, quick to laugh without needing the attention pointed back at her. The kind of woman who noticed when your cup had gone empty, when a joke had gone one word too far, when somebody had gone quiet at the wrong moment. She had lost her husband 2 years back, a man named Danny Vance who died in a wreck out on the county highway, and she carried that loss the way some people carry a bad shoulder, quiet, favoring it, never mentioning it unless you asked. I sometimes wondered how she and Diane came from the same house. Diane arranged people like she arranged the yard. Simone listened to them like they mattered. That night, I spent most of the cookout at the grill, serving plates and pretending not to hear my wife turn me into the evening's easy joke. Wesley keeps a maintenance log for the lawnmower, Diane said, lifting her drink. If affection ever needed an oil change, he'd finally be romantic. Everybody laughed. I smiled because smiling was the thing I had trained myself to do. Simone didn't laugh. She looked down at the paper plate in her lap, then up at me for half a second. Not pity. Something worse. Recognition. Later, when I carried out the peach cobbler, Diane patted my arm in front of the whole table and said, "See, he's useful when you point him at a task." Another laugh. Another smile from me. Another moment where Simone's eyes found mine and slid away fast. By 11, the cookout finally came apart. Folks hunted for keys. Goodbyes stretched too long by the driveway. Diane hugged necks, soaked up compliments on food she hadn't cooked, and sent everyone off glowing like she'd handed them a perfect night. Simone was the last one there. Her truck wouldn't turn over, just clicked, a dead battery in a gravel drive. "I can call somebody," she said quick, phone already in her hand. Diane barely looked up from stacking the good cups. "Wesley can run you home. It's on his way." "It's not really on my way," I said. Diane smiled without any heat in it. "You like driving." I didn't, but I took my keys off the hook. Simone followed me out to the truck, holding her cardigan closed at the collar against the cold. She looked different out there under the porch light, smaller somehow, not in size, just less guarded now that the polite noise of the party was behind us. The first few miles were quiet. Not awkward exactly, heavy. A light rain ticked across the windshield. The headlights of a passing hauler slid gold across her face and were gone. She kept looking at her phone, then locking it, then looking again. "You okay?" I asked. She nodded too fast. "Yes." I waited. She looked out at the black tree line, then said no. One word barely there. I eased off the gas as we came up on the one blinking light in town. "Simone." She turned toward me then, and I saw her hands. They were shaking. That changed everything. Whatever I had told myself this ride might be uncomfortable, strange, charged in a way I didn't want to name out loud. It wasn't any of that now. Something was wrong. "Take me somewhere private," she whispered. The light blinked from red to nothing and back. I didn't move the truck. For one stupid second I misread her. Not because Simone had done a single thing to earn it, but because I was a tired man in a dark cab, sitting with a woman I'd spent years being careful not to look at too long, and she had just said the kind of sentence that rearranges the air in a room. Then I saw her eyes. There was nothing inviting in them. There was fear. "Private where?" I asked. "Not your place, not mine," she said, and swallowed hard. "Somewhere we can talk without Diane knowing." My hands tightened on the wheel. Why would Diane need to not know? Simone looked down at the phone in her lap. Then she said, "Because she's the reason." I pulled off onto the gravel lot of the old Corley Farm Supply store, 3 miles out, close to years now, the windows soaped over and a faded feed sign creaking on one chain. It was lit just enough by the highway to feel safe, empty enough to feel private. Rain drummed soft on the roof. The one working streetlight at the road buzzed and flickered, half dead. For a while, Simone didn't say anything. She just sat there with the phone held in both hands, like it weighed more than it should. I kept my voice low and even. "Tell me what's going on." She shook her head. "You're going to hate me." "That's not an answer," I said. "I should have told you a long time ago." Simone. Her name came out harder than I meant it, and she flinched, and I hated myself for it right away. "I'm sorry," I said. "No," she said, and wiped one hand across her cheek, angry at the tear before it had finished falling. "You've got nothing to be sorry for. That's the whole problem." I stared at her. She unlocked the phone, opened a string of texts, and held it out to me. I didn't take it at first. Some part of me understood that the second I did, my life would split into a before and an after. Then I took it. The messages were from Diane. At first my brain wouldn't read them right. Then the words came into focus. "If Wesley asks, tell him we were together Tuesday. Say we went to that late yoga class and got smoothies after." Simone had written back, "Diane, I'm not going to lie to him." And Diane, "Don't be dramatic. He won't even ask. He trusts everybody." Then another one. Men like Wesley are handy to have around because they think being loyal makes them good. It just makes them easy. The inside of the cab went very still. I read that last line 3 times. Handy. Easy. Simone watched my face like every second of it cost her something. "That's not all of it," she whispered. I could barely hear my own voice. "What is this?" "She's been using me as her cover," Simone said. "For what?" She closed her eyes, and when she opened them, the shame in them wasn't hers, but she was carrying it anyway. "At first I told myself it was just somebody she was seeing," she said. "I hated it, but I kept telling myself it wasn't my marriage, and I didn't know enough to be sure." Her voice cracked. "Then a couple weeks ago, she asked me to back up a story, one that made you sound like the problem." I looked up from the phone. "What story?" "That you keep tabs on her. That you get on her about where she goes. That she needs somebody to vouch for her because you make her feel boxed in." I almost laughed, not because any of it was funny, because it was upside down. Diane came and went as she pleased. I never went through her phone, never followed her, never asked for a single password. Half the time I found out where she'd been, because somebody posted a photo 2 days later. "That's not true," I said. "I know it's not," she said. The speed of it landed on me. "Not defensive. Certain." Simone leaned a little closer, just enough that I could see the rain running down the glass reflected in her eyes. "I know who you are, Wesley." Something in my chest shifted. I didn't want it to, not right then, not with my wife's words glowing between us on a cracked phone screen, but it shifted anyway because my wife had just called me handy and easy, and the woman beside me was looking at those same parts of me, like they were worth guarding. Simone reached for the phone, and our fingers brushed. Barely. A stupid, accidental touch. Both of us went still anyway. She pulled back first. "I didn't bring you out here for that," she said fast. "I know," I said. "I mean it. I know." Her eyes held mine a beat, and for one dangerous second the cab felt too small for the both of us. Then she looked away and opened something else on the phone. An audio file. My stomach dropped. "Simone," I said carefully, "is that?" She stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the little triangle. The reason I couldn't keep quiet anymore. Outside, the rain came down the windshield in crooked lines. Inside, my whole marriage sat there shaking in her hand. Then Simone whispered, "Before I play this, you need to understand something." I looked at her. Her voice was barely holding together. "Diane isn't just leaving you, Wesley. She's getting people ready to believe you had it coming." I didn't want her to play it. That was the truth, a coward's truth maybe, but the truth. Because text a desperate man can talk himself out of. Tone can be misread. Context can be missing. A cruel sentence typed in a bad mood can get dressed up later as stress. But a voice is a hard thing to save yourself from. Simone watched me across the cab, thumb still hovering. You don't have to hear it tonight, she said. That nearly made me laugh, not because it was funny, because she had just walked me to the edge of a cliff and was still being considerate about the wind. Yes, I said, I do. Her eyes searched mine. Then she pressed play. Diane's voice filled the truck, light and loose, a couple drinks in, the way she got when charm turned sharp at the corners. Simone, I need you to quit acting like Wesley is some kick dog, she said. He's fine. He likes being the good husband. It gives him something to do. Then Simone's voice, quieter. You're using him. Diane laughed. That laugh hurt worse than the words. I'm married steady. Don't turn it into a soap opera. My hand tightened on the phone. The recording kept going. Simone asked, does he know about Julian? There was a pause. Then Diane, almost bored, he doesn't need to, not yet. Julian. I knew a Julian. Julian Holloway, the broker Diane, worked her listings through, tall and smooth, always a little too easy about putting a hand on her back at the open houses. I noticed it once, said something once. She had rolled her eyes and told me I was embarrassing myself. I had apologized. That memory burned now. The recording wasn't done, and Simone's voice came sharper. And the lawyer, Diane sighed. I'm just being smart. If this gets ugly, I need people to already see the pattern. Wesley's quiet. That works for me. A quiet man is easy to make look guilty if you describe him the right way. The cab seemed to tip under me. I looked through the windshield at the dark, soaked-over windows of the feed store, at the rain smearing my own reflection back at me. A quiet man is easy to make look guilty. Simone stopped the recording. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. For 11 years, I had believed the worst thing in my marriage was this, being loved without much warmth. I'd been wrong. The worst thing was learning my wife had studied my patience, read it like a soft clause in a contract. Simone pulled the phone back into her lap. I'm sorry, she whispered. That was when I really looked at her. Her eyes were red at the rims. Her hands were still shaking. She looked like a woman who had spent weeks standing in the gap, caught between loyalty and doing right, and tonight, doing right had finally dragged her out into the rain. You recorded that, I said. She nodded. After she asked me to lie the first time. I don't even know what I was thinking. Proof, maybe. Something to hold. I hated myself for doing it. Why didn't you tell me then? I said. She flinched, but she didn't look away. Because she's my sister, Wesley. She doesn't sound much like a sister right now, I said. No, she said, and her mouth twisted. She sounds like somebody I kept making excuses for, only because we grew up in the same house. That answer was too honest to be tidy. I looked back out at the road. How long? I said. She understood. Julian. I nodded once. I'm not sure exactly, she said. Guess. She swallowed. 10 weeks, maybe. Since the spring. 10 weeks. The number landed without any drama, and somehow that made it heavier. I thought about Diane coming in late on Tuesdays. Diane showering before bed. Diane telling me not to wait up because the class ran long. Diane kissing my cheek in front of company, then turning away before I could decide if it meant anything. I thought about Simone at our cookouts getting quieter these last months, leaving early, looking at me, sometimes like she had something stuck behind her teeth, and hated herself for wanting to say it. And then I thought about tonight, her in my truck, her hands shaking, her saying, take me somewhere private, a sentence that could have made her look guilty if a person only heard that one piece. Maybe that was the worst part. Diane had built a world where even the person trying to warn me, even her, could be made to look like the sin. What did she ask you to say? I said. Simone closed her eyes a second. If a lawyer ever called, or if you ever asked about her Tuesdays, I was supposed to say she'd been with me. Dinner, that yoga class, whatever lined up. Tuesdays, I said, and my voice sounded like it came from the next county. Diane had been gone nearly every Tuesday night for 2.5 months. Simone nodded. I never once said yes. Not one time. I believe you, I said. She looked at me so fast it almost hurt. You shouldn't. Not yet. You should be questioning everything tonight. I am, I said. Then question me too. I did. Her lips parted a little. I handed the phone back. You're still here, I said. That answers more than you think. For a second, her face changed, like the sentence had touched somewhere she'd been trying to keep out of the night. Then she looked down, blinking hard. I'm not the good guy in this story, Wesley, she said. That's not true, I said. I stayed quiet too long. You came tonight because she crossed a line you couldn't stand behind. That counts. She shook her head. No, it just means I found my line late. There was something so plainly decent in that. I had to look at the windshield instead of her face because Diane would have taken that same guilt and sharpened it into a tool, and Simone had turned it into responsibility. That was the whole difference between them, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. My wife had spent years shaving little jokes off of me, until I learned to smile before I felt the cut. Simone had sat at those same tables and clocked exactly where the knife went in. Diane had looked at my loyalty and called it easy. Simone had looked at my loyalty and tried, too late maybe, but still tried, to keep me from getting punished for it. That was the first moment the marriage came loose inside me. Not over. Not yet, but loose like a chain I'd been white-knuckling had finally worn through enough skin until I started to wonder why I was still holding on. My phone rang. Diane. Both of us looked at the screen lit up in the cup holder. Simone straightened fast and wiped her cheek. You should answer, she said. I don't know that I can. You have to act like everything's fine until you know what you're doing, she said. That was practical. It was also a kindness. I answered on speaker before I could talk myself out of it. Hey. Diane's voice came through smooth and a little annoyed. You dropping Simone off or driving her to another state? You've been gone almost 35 minutes. Rain ticked on the roof. Simone stared at her hands. I kept my voice level. Roads are wet, taking it slow. Diane sighed. Of course you are. Did she get weird on you? Simone's head came up. I went still. What? I said. Oh, don't do that, Diane said and laughed soft. She's been mopey for months. Wesley. I think she's just lonely and she leans on whoever's closest. Just drop her at her place and come home, okay? I don't need one of her little moral episodes tonight. Simone shut her eyes. There it was. The cruelty pitched, just casual enough to pass for personality. I looked at Simone in the dark, and something in me settled into place. Not wanting her. Not yet. A decision. I'll be home soon, I said. Diane softened. Good. And Wesley. Yeah. You're a sweetheart for hauling her around. Just don't let her make you feel responsible for stuff that isn't yours. The call ended. For a few seconds the cab was quiet. Simone let out a breath like she'd been holding it underwater. I'm sorry, she said again. I turned the key and the engine came back to life. Stop apologizing for her, I said. Simone looked over at me. I pulled out of the gravel lot, but I didn't point the truck toward her house. She caught it right away. Wesley, I need one thing before I take you home, I said. What? I kept my eyes on the road, my hands steady on the wheel in a way the rest of me wasn't. I need you to show me Julian. Simone went quiet. Then she unlocked her phone again, and this time when she held it out, she wasn't just handing me proof. She was handing me the last chance to keep believing in a marriage one Diane had already walked away from. It wasn't just a name. It was a face. A polished man in a good jacket, standing next to Diane outside the Hollow Creek Steakhouse 2 towns over, the photo shot from across the lot through a line of parked cars, probably by Simone herself. Diane was laughing up at him with her hand flat on his chest. Not friendly, not business, nothing I could explain away without turning pathetic. The date stamp read a Tuesday. Of course it did. I stared at that picture until the edges of the screen blurred. Simone sat beside me, not filling the silence. And that was the thing that set her apart from her sister. Diane crowded every quiet moment until she owned it. Simone let the hurt just be what it was. I followed her once, Simone said quietly. I'm not proud of it. I looked at her. Why? Because she used my name, she said. If she was going to make me part of the lie, I needed to know what the lie was covering. Before I say the next part of this, you should hear me tell you plain. Have you ever had somebody protect you from a lie, even when the truth cost them everything they had? Sit with that one. I'll get back to it. I handed the phone back. My fingers brushed hers again, and this time neither of us pulled away right off. Half a second, maybe less. But in that half second, I felt the strangest thing. Not wanting first. Relief. Somebody was sitting beside me in the wreck, not asking me to pretend it was furniture. Simone looked down at our hands, then moved her slow back into her lap. I'm sorry, she whispered. I almost told her to quit apologizing again. Instead, I said, thank you. That broke something small in her face, just enough that I saw how badly she needed to hear it and how much she hated needing it. I drove her home after that. When we got close, she asked me to stop a block short of her house. If Diane checks the doorbell camera, or texts a neighbor, or she stopped and shook her head. I hate that I sound paranoid. You don't, I said. I do, she said. You sound like somebody who knows her. That went quiet between us. Before she got out, she turned back to me. Don't confront her tonight, Wesley, please. Her voice tightened. Not because she deserves the time. Because you deserve the proof. Sleep on it and make a plan. I laughed once with no humor in it. Not sure sleep's coming tonight. Then proof and a plan, she said. She opened the door and the cold rain slipped in against my hand. Wesley. Yeah. She's going to be sweet when you walk in, she said, and her eyes were sad. That's what she does when she thinks she might be losing hold of something. She was right. Diane was up in the kitchen when I came in, barefoot, in the soft robe, hair down around her shoulders, a glass of water by her hand instead of wine, which meant she wanted to look sober, gentle, reasonable. There you are, she said. No edge, no accusation, just warmth measured out to the ounce. I stood in the doorway with my jacket still on. She crossed the room and touched my chest with 2 fingers. You look worn out. I used to love when she noticed that. Now I just wondered what she wanted from noticing it. Long drive, I said. She sighed. Simone can be a lot. I know she means well, but she gets dramatic when she's lonely. There was again a little poison handed over like it was concern. She seemed upset. I said, careful. Diane's mouth curved. She's always upset about something. You're too soft, Wesley. Women like my sister see that, and they lean on it. Women like my sister. I thought about Simone shaking in my truck, because she'd picked the truth over the person she grew up sharing a room with. I thought about Diane laughing on that recording, while she called my loyalty a thing that worked for her. And for the first time in my marriage, my wife put her hand on me, and I felt nothing but the distance. She leaned up to kiss me. I turned my face just enough that her lips caught my cheek. Her hand went still against my chest. That was the first crack she felt. Everything all right? She asked. I looked at that face, the face I'd trusted, the face that had learned exactly how to go soft, right when she needed me easy to steer. Just tired, I said. Then I walked to the spare room and shut the door and turned the lock. The next morning, I didn't go into the shop. I called in for the first time in 3 years, sat at the kitchen table after Diane left for a showing, and opened up everything I'd spent years not looking at because I told myself trust was the same as love. Bank statements, the credit cards, the shared calendar on her laptop, the phone bill. By noon, it had a shape. A steakhouse charge on a Tuesday, back when Diane had told me she was at yoga with her sister. A retainer paid to a family law office downtown. 2 transfers out of our savings into an account I didn't recognize. A charge at a men's clothing store the week before Julian's birthday, which I only knew because his brokerage had posted about it. None of it was one big dramatic reveal. That was almost worse. It was a pattern. The marriage hadn't blown apart in a night. It had been taken down quiet, one careful piece at a time, while I was still hauling groceries in from the truck and fixing the gate latch, still smiling at cookouts where my wife called me handy in front of people who laughed. At 2:15, my phone buzzed. Simone, are you safe? It said. Not, are you okay? Safe. That one word told me she read Diane better than I ever wanted to know. I wrote back. I found the lawyer, the steakhouse, and the account. She didn't answer for almost a full minute. Then, there's one more thing. I didn't want to send it unless you asked. I stared at the message. Then I typed, send it. A voice memo came through. I played it once, then again, then a third time because some part of me needed to be dead, certain the woman talking was my wife. Diane's voice. If Wesley starts asking questions, I'll cry. He can't stand watching a woman cry. He'll be apologizing before he even knows what he did wrong. Simone's voice, low and furious. That's cruel. Diane laughed. No, it's just marriage. You figure out what works, and you use it. Then the part that ended it. He's not going to fight, Simone. He's decent. That's what makes it easy. I stopped the recording. The kitchen went silent around me. That was the moment I quit trying to save my marriage. Not because Simone was anything to me yet. Because I finally understood the difference between the 2 women. Diane had looked at my decency and seen a weak spot to work. Simone had looked at the same decency and risked the only family she had left to protect it. My phone buzzed again. Simone. I'm sorry. I called her. She picked up on the first ring. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she said, Wesley. My voice came out rough. I'm not going to try to fix this. She let out a shaky breath. I know that probably hurts, she said. It does, I said. I wish it didn't. I don't, I said. That made her go quiet. I looked around the kitchen Diane had decorated, the matched stools, the fresh flowers, the whole tidy life I finally understood had been staged for everybody but me. If it didn't hurt, I said, I'd have to admit I gave 11 years to nothing. It wasn't nothing, she said. You were real in it. That counts. I closed my eyes. That sentence did more damage to my composure than every recording Diane ever made, because my wife had spent years making me feel foolish for being good, and Simone, with one plain line, made it feel like the goodness hadn't been a mistake. I heard her breathing on the other end. Then she said, very quiet, I shouldn't say this. I know, I said. A pause. Then, barely above a whisper, I hate that she had you and never once knew what she had. The line went silent again. My hand tightened around the phone. Every part of me wanted to say something I hadn't earned the right to say yet, so I didn't. I held the line. I held the boundary, barely. Finally, I said, I'm still married. I know, she whispered, but not for long. Her breath caught, and that was the first time the thing between us stopped feeling impossible, started feeling like something waiting on the other side of a locked door. That evening, I printed the messages, saved the recordings twice over, copied the statements, and called a divorce attorney. Then I sat in the front room and waited for Diane to come home. This time I wasn't smiling. She came in at 7:28. I remember the time because I'd spent the better part of an hour watching the clock, like it might hand me some nerve. The door opened. Her heels crossed the entry. She called my name in that soft voice, the one she used when she wanted the house to feel normal, before she'd even checked whether it was. I was standing in the front room. On the coffee table in front of me sat 3 neat stacks. The messages, the bank statements, the printed transcript of the recordings. Diane stopped in the doorway. For one second, her face was blank. Then she smiled. That was the first thing she did. Not panic, not guilt, not shock. She smiled the way a person smiles walking into a room to find a spill, one she fully intends to make somebody else mop up. What's all this? She asked. The end, I said. Her smile tightened. That's dramatic. I agree, I said. She came closer, slow, her eyes moving over the paper. Have you been going through our finances? Our finances, I said. Interesting way to put it. Her eyes cut to me. There was the first crack. I picked up the steakhouse charge and set on top of the pile. Tuesdays. Her face shifted again, but only a little. Diane was always good at small corrections. She could go from wife to victim to insulted queen inside a single breath. You followed me, she said. No, I said. Then who did? I didn't answer. She understood anyway. Simone's name arrived in the room before either of us said it out loud. Diane laughed once, low and bitter. Of course. I said nothing. She's wanted this for years, Diane said. I looked at her. Wanted what? You, she said, like it was an accusation. Poor sweet Wesley, comforted by my sad, lonely widow of a sister. God, she must have loved playing the rescuer. That was when I almost lost it. Not because she'd insulted me, I was used to that. Because even now, staring at proof of what she'd done, Diane's first move was to make Simone the dirty part of the story. I named the anger to myself and set it down. I kept my voice flat. This isn't about Simone. Oh, please, she said. It's about Julian, I said. The lawyer, the money, the lies, the recordings, the story you were building about me before I even knew there was a fight. Her eyes flashed. You recorded me. Simone did, I said, after you asked her to lie for you. Diane's mouth opened, then closed. That silence was the closest thing to a confession, the only one I was going to get out of her. I picked up one of the transcripts. You said I was decent, I read. That's what makes it easy. She looked away, just for a second, but I saw it. And strangely, that hurt more than if she'd screamed at me. Because in that little look away, I saw the truth. She'd meant it. She hadn't said it in anger. She'd said it because that was how she saw me. Handy. Easy. Manageable. A good man run through a selfish woman's translation and turned into a convenient one. I wanted to save this marriage, I said. Her eyes came back to mine. I did. Even when you made me feel small. Even when you laughed at me in front of people. Even when I started falling asleep next to you, feeling lonelier than I ever felt living alone. For once, she didn't interrupt. Tonight, I said, I finally understood there's nothing here left to save. Diane's face hardened. Because Simone told you that. No, I said. Because you did. I touched the papers on the table. Every word. She folded her arms. So what, Wesley? You want a divorce? Fine. But don't stand there acting clean if you run straight to her. That one landed exactly where she aimed it, because I had thought about Simone all day. Her voice, her shaking hands, her telling me I'd been real in the marriage and that it counted. The fact that my wife had known me 11 years and used my decency like a handle, and Simone had known me from the outside and still tried to guard the one part of me, the part I'd started to feel ashamed of. But I wasn't going to let Diane make that ugly. So I said, I'm not leaving because I want Simone. Diane smirked. I'm leaving because I don't want you, I said. The room went quiet. That was the sentence she couldn't twist. Not into jealousy, not into some seduction, not into betrayal. It was clean and it was mine. By 9 I had a bag packed. Diane didn't cry, not really. She tried once, near the stairs, her voice trembling, her eyes going bright, saying, You're making a mistake. And maybe the man I'd been a week earlier, he would have crossed the room to comfort her. But I'd heard her say on that recording that she could have me apologizing, well before I knew what I'd done. So I watched the tears gather, and I didn't move. That was when she finally looked afraid. Not heartbroken, afraid, because the old trick wasn't working anymore. I want to stop here a second and ask you something, because I've wondered it ever since. What would you have done in my place, sitting in that truck, handed the truth by the last person you'd expect? Tell me in the comments. I read all of them. I checked into a motel out by the reservoir. Small room, bad painting of a lighthouse bolted to the wall, one chair, a soda machine humming outside the door like it was keeping a secret. At 11:40, somebody knocked. I already knew, and I opened the door. Simone stood in the walkway, holding a paper sack and my old canvas work coat. You left this hanging by the back door, she said. I looked at the coat. You went by the house. Not inside, she said. Diane pitched it off the porch after sending me a few creative texts. That almost made me laugh. Almost. Simone looked past me into the room. Are you okay? No, I said. She nodded like she respected the answer too much to soften it. I brought food, she said. Figured you hadn't eaten. That did something to me. Not the food. The noticing. Diane would have asked why I was being difficult. Simone brought a sandwich in a paper sack, stood in a motel walkway like she wasn't sure she was allowed to care this much. You shouldn't be here, I said. I know, she said. Diane will use it. I know. Then why did you come? Her eyes lifted to mine. Because today you found out your whole house was built on a lie, she said quietly. And I couldn't stand the thought of you sitting in one more room alone with it. I looked at her, and there it was, the thing I've been working not to name all night. Not temptation. Not some escape hatch. Care. Plain, inconvenient, dangerous care. I stepped back and let her in. She set the sack on the little desk, then stayed near the door like she was afraid of making the room any smaller. I'm not here to be anything, she said fast. I just want to make sure you ate and got your coat back. Then I'll go. Simone. She stopped. You didn't wreck my marriage, I said. Her face tightened. You didn't, I said. You told me the truth after Diane had already wrecked it herself. Her eyes filled. I waited too long, she said. Maybe, I said. That honesty landed on her, but she nodded and took it. So did I said. She looked at me. I waited too long to admit that kindness without respect isn't a marriage, I said. I waited too long to quit laughing at jokes that made me disappear. I waited too long to believe what I felt every time you looked at me, like I was still in the room. Her breath caught. The space between us changed. Not all at once. It had been changing all night, maybe longer than that. I stepped closer. She didn't move away. I'm still married, I said. I know. My attorney files Monday. I know. I want this, I said, and it came out rougher than I meant. I want you. But I'm not going to let Diane turn the first honest thing I've felt in years, turn it into something dirty. Simone's tears finally slipped over. Then we wait, she whispered. I should have let that be the end of the night. I really should have. But she reached for the coat at the same moment I did, and our hands met again, and this time neither of us pulled back. The kiss wasn't planned. It wasn't careful enough. It wasn't long. But it happened, a quiet, aching break in the middle of all the restraint we'd been holding. When it ended, she stepped back first, one hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with guilt and wanting both. I closed my eyes, not because I regretted it, because I didn't, and that was the problem. Simone reached for the door. I should go, she whispered. I nodded, even though every part of me wanted to ask her to stay. She opened the door, then looked back. I'll wait, she said. And then she was gone, and I was standing in that motel room with a cold sandwich on the desk, my wife's lies in a folder on the bed, and the first kiss that felt less like a betrayal, more like the start of a life I was scared I didn't deserve. Simone kept her promise. That was the first thing that made me trust the future. Not the kiss. Not the way she'd looked at me before she left. The promise. I'll wait. And she did. Monday morning, my attorney filed the separation papers. By Wednesday, Diane had already tried 3 versions of the story. In one, I turned cold and suspicious. In another, Simone had worked on me while I was weak. In the third, Diane was simply heartbroken that private family business was getting twisted by outsiders. She didn't post anything outright. Diane was too polished for that. She preferred it done in whispers, in careful texts, in lunches with the people you both know, a few well-placed tears in the right kitchens. But she'd miscalculated one thing. Simone wasn't the only person who had hurt her. Over the next few weeks, small truths started working their way loose. One of the couples from the cookout remembered Diane joking that I was too trusting, that I'd never check a receipt. Another woman admitted Diane had asked whether she'd say they were together on a Tuesday, if it ever came up. And Julian's name stopped being a rumor the day his wife called my attorney, after she found steakhouse charges of her own. That part one hadn't seen coming. Diane hadn't just taken apart my marriage. She'd stepped into someone else's too. The divorce wasn't a movie. No courtroom explosion, no dramatic confession under oath, just attorneys and documents and financial disclosures, and the slow, plain humiliation of paper telling the truth better than people ever do. The hidden account came out. The steakhouse charges came out. The transfers came out. And when Diane's attorney floated the idea that I'd been controlling, that I kept her boxed in, my attorney laid down the text where Diane asked Simone to lie, and the recording where she called me decent enough to manage. After that, the tone changed. Diane got less wounded and more cooperative. Funny how evidence improves a person's manners. She didn't get her comeuppance scene. I want to be honest about that, because I know part of you wanted one. There was no moment where she broke down in public, no crowd turning on her, no speech where I put her in her place. She just lost her grip on the story, one thread at a time, and when the story was gone, so was the power she'd had over the room. She signed what she had to sign, and she went quiet, and quiet was the last thing Diane ever wanted to be. I moved into a small place across town. It had a view of a cinder block wall, a fridge that clicked to itself at night, and exactly one chair for the first 2 weeks. Simone came by once, only once. She stood in the doorway holding a box of dishes she said she didn't need, though every plate was wrapped careful and not one of them was chipped. She didn't come in at first. I could just leave these here, she said. Simone. Her eyes lifted. I thought about that kiss every day, since, every hour if I'm being straight about it, not in some guilty fantasy, in a painful, unfinished way. But I also knew Diane was still hunting for a way to make Simone the headline. So I held back. Thank you, I said. Simone nodded. The space between us was full of everything we weren't doing. Then she smiled, sad, and said, "This is harder than I thought." Waiting, I said. "No," she said, and her voice went soft. "Not taking care of you." That nearly took my legs out because Diane had called my loyalty easy, and Simone looked at care like a thing you had to have discipline to do right. We waited 3 months before we had dinner alone. Not because we'd stopped wanting each other, because we wanted the beginning to be able to survive the story, whatever story people would try to tell about it. Now here's the thing I keep coming back to. Have you ever been the one everybody underestimated, the one somebody decided was easy. I like to hear about it. When the divorce was final, Diane kept the share the law gave her and lost the things she tried to take by performance. She didn't get the version where I apologized. She didn't get to paint Simone as a thief. She didn't keep the group of friends who'd finally seen the pattern, seen it clear enough to be embarrassed by their own laughing. I didn't celebrate. That surprised people. But a divorce, even from somebody who hurt you, is still a funeral for the life you thought you had. Simone understood that. On the day it was final, she didn't show up with champagne. She showed up with dinner, soup this time, because somewhere along the way soup and sandwiches had become the language between us. She stood in my little kitchen in a soft gray sweater, hair tucked behind one ear, looking at the single chair by the table. "You still only have the one chair," she said. "I was avoiding a commitment to furniture," I said. "It starts there." She laughed, small and real. I hadn't heard that sound without sadness stuck to it in months. We ate sitting on the floor with our backs against the cabinets, because the one chair felt too formal and the couch hadn't come yet. For a while we talked about ordinary things, her clinic, the dog she'd stayed late to sit with, the fact that Diane had apparently signed up for some wellness retreat, which Simone said tracked for a woman who needed real help but preferred scented candles. I laughed harder than I meant to. Then the quiet came back. Simone set her bowl aside. "Are you free now?" she asked. I looked at her. There were a lot of answers. Legally, yes. In my chest, not all the way. Getting closer every day. So I gave her the only useful truth. "I'm free enough to choose careful." Her eyes went soft. "And were you choosing?" she asked. "You," I said. Slow. Plain. Not hiding behind a thing. She closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them, the fear was still there, but so was relief. This time when I kissed her, it wasn't in a motel room full of wreckage. It was in my half-empty kitchen, next to 2 bowls of soup with the divorce papers signed, and nobody's lies standing in the room with us. That kiss felt like a beginning, a real one. We did go slow, slower than wanting liked, faster than fear would have picked. Simone lost some friends, a few because they chose Diane's polished version of things, a few because Simone couldn't respect people who needed every truth to stay socially convenient. She spoke that boundary in her own voice, not mine. I stood beside her while she did it, and I kept my mouth shut because it was hers to say. I lost the life I'd arranged around being reliable for a woman who never respected it. But in the empty space, after all that loss, something better started to grow. Simone and I took walks, then dinners, then whole weekends. She found out I'm hopeless at buying furniture, but good at putting it together. I found out she cries at old dog videos and blames it on allergies. She still apologized sometimes for telling me late. I still reminded her, she told me in time. For months, and we stopped keeping count of what was allowed. A year later, we moved in together. Not into the old house, never that, a different place with windows that caught the morning light, and a kitchen big enough for 2 people to cook badly at the same time. 2 years later, on a rainy evening, I pulled off onto the gravel lot of the old Corley farm supply store. The same soaped-over windows, the same feed sign creaking on its chain, and I asked her to marry me. She stared at the ring, then at the dark windows, then at me. "Here," she whispered. "Here," I said. "The worst night of your life started here," she said. "No," I said. "The truth started here." Simone cried then, not the way she had in the motel walkway, not out of guilt, out of something letting go. "Yes," she said. Years later, when people ask how the 2 of us ended up together, Simone looks at me first because the story was never a simple one. I usually say she told me the truth, back when a lie would have been easier for her than for anybody. And Simone says he chose to be free before he chose me. Both are true, but the deeper truth is this. I didn't fall for my wife's sister because she asked me to take her somewhere private. I fell for her because on the most private ruin of my life, she refused to let me sit alone with a lie. So let me leave you with this. Have you ever had somebody protect you from a lie, even when the truth cost them the people they loved? And what would you have done if the last person you expected, if they handed you the truth on a dark road home? Tell me your story down in the comments. If this one meant something to you, leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.